look, I'm in a new space, okay? We in a new space. It's not permanent. If you watched Vlogmas, you've seen this space before. But, 2024 is telling me so far on today that she do what she want to do. So I'm just rolling with the punches and we recording the video. I don't want to hear about it. Hi guys, welcome back to Shelby and the Book Club. I'm Shelby Monet, and first I want to say Happy New Year. I can't believe we made it to 2024. We are in a new reading year. Everything resets. We are starting from scratch, and I really hope you guys achieve all your reading goals, and just know that I'm here to help you. In today's video, we are going to go over some of my December stats. Storygraph is actually down right now as I'm recording this, which is actually a good thing. Why is it a good thing? Because that means that all of you are converting to Storygraph. So I love that, and I'm not going to complain. So we'll do some of my December stats. Most of what I read you guys can find in Vlogmas if you haven't already watched that. And then we'll go over my stats for the year of our Lord Beyonce 2023. I read a total of 91 books. The most books that I've read in the last couple of years. I think before that, 75, 80-ish was my sweet spot. And I blew that out of the water. And then we'll go over my favorite books for 2023, which was very hard to pick from 91, so there will be some honorable mentions. So if you'd like to hear it, here it go. Before we get started, I do want to say thank you all so much for all your support. Last year was a pretty rough year for me, and deciding to start recording YouTube videos again was a bit of a difficult decision for me to make, but you guys have made it way worth my while. Like, y'all helped me reach my goal of 2,000 subscribers before 2024. And y'all have just been so supportive, supporting my Amazon storefront. Y'all have been commenting and being engaged, and I thank y'all so much. I thank y'all so much. So without further ado, let's get started. Okay, December. A girl read like 18 books. So originally I started out December just trying to make my goal of 75 books, and I read 16 more books than that. And I kept telling myself, like, oh, I'm gonna take a break, I'm gonna take a break, and I just never took a break. I kept reading. I tell you guys all the time, like, I read so much because my want to read is way stronger than my want to do anything else. The urge to read is always there. Do I have any honorable mentions? I feel like I spoke about them all in Vlogmas. One that stands out, Carter and Demi, by M.L. Bash. I'm trying to think, what else? I've read so much. I don't know. I read a lot more Casey Mills. I read some, I can't remember the names. I will try to put some things on the screen because I can't look at Storygraph because Storygraph is down right now. I read some novellas that were a part of like Christmassy things. Those were cute. Some of them were too much Christmas, which even as my favorite holiday, it was too much Christmas, but others were not. There was one, I think it was, I can't think of their name, but he was a cowboy, and I like that. I like that one. I like that a lot. But she ended up staying on his ranch, and they end up like falling in love. It was cute. She learned how to ride horses and realized that ranch life was for her. That one was by Casey Mills. Baby, my dog is here. If y'all see or hear him, I apologize in advance. We making it do what it do, how we can here today. So yeah, that was pretty much it for December. Again, shameless plug, if you want to see what I read throughout most of the month, you can watch Vlogmas because I talked about, reviewed, and did all of that in those vlogs. So there's that. Now, as for the year of 2023, so I read a total of, and I will put a picture of this graphic somewhere on the screen. I read a total of 91 books. That is 28,019 pages for the year. The first book that I read is The Bird Tattoo by Dunya McHale, which I absolutely loved. I love that book, and we will talk about that in a second. The last book I read is The Perfect Christmas by T. Tillman. We're not going to talk about the longest book that I read. You can see it on the screen, but we ain't going to talk about that. And then the shortest book that I read is Ronnie and Drew by Casey Mills. My top genres for the year were romance, obviously. One of my goals last year was to read a genre outside of my comfort zone, and I had picked nonfiction, and that just didn't go well, but then turned around and read a bunch of romance, which is outside of my, y'all probably can hear my mama laughing. It's a lot going on, but it's okay. I ended up reading a lot of romance, like y'all know and can see, which is also outside of my comfort zone. So I'm proud of myself. It didn't go the way that I anticipated it to go, but it went somewhere, so that's that. Next is historical fiction. Third place is contemporary. Fourth is literary. And fifth is fantasy. So I feel like my reading is a bit diverse. I do want to read, sorry, trying to get closer to my child so he don't have a fit. I do want to get these numbers on this graph a little bit more closer together so that it's a little bit more equal and it's a little bit more diverse. But y'all know I read just about any and everything. Next, my top authors: Ashley Antoinette. Will not be talking about her books on this channel. I'm not gonna talk about the books. If you want to read them at your own volition. Casey Mills, that should not be a shocker. And Alexandria House, that shouldn't be a shocker either, because I've talked about both of them in one vlog or video or another. And then some of the 5-star reads. This just shows 3. I don't know how many were 5-star. I don't even know. I'm sure I can look that up. I'm not. But The Bird Tattoo, Destroyer of Worlds by Matt Ruff. If you guys are fans of Lovecraft Country and you have not read the second book, I think you absolutely should. It was phenomenal. And then we have From Scratch by Tim B. Locke, which was a memoir. It was actually one of my book club picks for last year when I was still doing the book club. And I absolutely totally enjoyed that book. It reminded me why I love memoirs and why I love literary nonfiction. I love things that are told as a story, right? I don't take in nonfiction that is just a bunch of facts being thrown at me. It reads too much like history, and as nosy as I am, I need it to be told to me. Like, I need you to tell me real life things like messy gossip. That's what I need, which is why I like literary nonfiction, because it's like you're reading a story. It's like somebody sitting down being like, girl, so let me tell you what such and such did, and blah, blah, blah. So those are my stats. Before we get into my favorites, I want to do some honorable mentions, and I just want to give like a little bit of a disclaimer. When I pick my favorites, right, it doesn't necessarily mean that these books were 5-star. They're probably, majority of these I probably rated a 4-star, right? But a lot of the time, my favorites are based on how they make me feel, right? How I felt while I was reading them. Do they incite some type of emotion? Could I not stop talking about it, right? Like, those don't automatically mean a 5-star book to me. Because when I rate, I'm rating more about the writing, right? So like the writing could have been okay, but it could still be my favorite because of how it made me feel, or because the story just stuck with me, or because I love the characters and things like that. I think we often get too caught up in how people rate books because we are depending on other people to pick books that we like for us, instead of just saying, hey, the synopsis sounds good, I think I want to read it. Me liking a book and you not liking a book, okay, girl, if I like it, you might hate it. If I hate it, you might like it. Those shouldn't be determining factors on how you maneuver your book reading life, okay? All right, okay. So, some honorable mentions of books that were my favorite reads this year. First up, we have Nobody to Love You Better by M.O. Bash. This is the first reverse harem that I've ever read. And when I tell you it was spicy, it was spicy. It was fast paced. It had a little bit, they was a little rough around the edges. They sold a little bit of drugs or whatever, it was just it was a little out there. She goes back to her hometown. She runs into these two guys that she went to high school with, because they all grew up in the same town. And one of them, she used to have a crush on, but felt like he didn't have a crush on her, and come to find out he did. And his best friend and him have a history of sharing women and are very open to sharing her if that is what she is into. And, use your imagination from there. It was very good. It led to me reading a ton of ML Bash in the last couple of months, because I got my iPad mini in November. So this was at the beginning of December? I don't know, y'all. Anyway, it was the first thing that I read on my iPad mini. So there's that. Next up, another romance, Before I Let Go by Kennedy Ryan. If y'all have been here long enough, you will remember me snot crying about this book. Before I Let Go is a second chance romance, which is actually how I got into reading romance to begin with. So this is a married couple, that divorcees, who own a business together. They have children. They've gone through some really, really terrible things in their marriage that caused them to break up, right? Things that would cause anybody to break up, things that would cause anybody to struggle through relationships. And because they have this business together, they're together a lot, and they realize some things, and second chance romance. It was really, really good. It made me a fan of Kennedy Ryan. This is the first in a series. The second one comes out this year. I cannot wait to read it. I'm telling you right now, y'all will get a reading vlog. I cannot wait to read the second book. It won't be about the same couple that's in the first one, that's in Before I Let Go. It's about a friend in their friend group. I can't wait to read it. Next, Trinity by Zelda Lockhart. You guys know how I feel about historical fiction. It is my jam. I absolutely love historical fiction. Trinity follows a spirit that is following this family throughout a few generations of their men, and it really shows how history repeats itself if we don't take the time to heal it, which I think is so amazing. Another reason why I want you all to read more fiction, because fiction does what y'all think those self-help books do. And I have nothing against self-help books. I've read some of them, but when I see a lot of y'all say like, oh, I want to get my life together, so you buy every self-help book that y'all can find and then don't follow none of what those self-help books are doing. What was the point, girl? But reading things like Trinity by Zelda Lockhart, it helps you, it gives you the insight to some thoughts and maybe the motives behind why things look the way that they do, right? I think a lot of times when we're on a healing process and we are trying to figure out, like, how do I heal this thing? Or why would this person do this thing to me? The things that we can't see is their lineage, right? We can't see their family tree and the trauma that has happened to them generationally that has caused them to do the things that they're doing to us, right? We can't see it. When you read books like this, that you most likely avoid because, oh, it makes me so uncomfortable and it makes me sad. It makes you uncomfortable because it's pulling on those things that you need answers to, right? So read more fiction, because the fiction does the things y'all swear them self-help books is doing. And they not, baby, they not. I'm telling you, they not. They not doing as much work as you think as you're giving them credit for. Zelda Lockhart wrote an amazing book with Trinity, even down to when that spirit is actually born. Like, it's a well put together book. It touches on so many topics about Black men and the things that they have been through and the trauma that they have been through. It's a phenomenal read. I think about the book often. When people say certain things to me, I'm immediately like, oh, you should read Trinity, especially if you are a spiritual person or consider yourself a witchy person. You should definitely read Trinity by Zelda Lockhart. I think it'll put together, it'll change your mind about how you think about your ancestors and so on and so forth. It's a very amazing book. Next we have Coleman Hill by Kim Coleman Foote, another book that I did a review video on. I love this book for so many different reasons. A lot of the same reasons why I love Trinity by Zelda Lockhart. It's a look into a whole generation, right? Like a look into a family, and how them moving from the South to the North affected this family over the years. It takes place in New Jersey, which is a lot of the reason why I got the book, right? I'm from New Jersey. And the town, it's Vauxhall. I used to work near Vauxhall. I know people that live in Vauxhall. Like, it was cool. But then, like, reading it, it just was different. I love historical fiction. This is also a biomythography. A biomythography is a genre that comprises of biography, mythology, and history. So the author took her family's story and took her own liberties with some things to kind of fill in the blanks and so on and so forth. But it was so good. And the author's note is also amazing to read, right? I think that's something that is missing in a lot of things. Forwards in the author's notes. We need to be reading books from where the author wants us to be a lot of the time. Like, obviously your own perspectives and your own life experiences are going to determine how you absorb certain things, right? But I think a lot of the time what's missing is, where was the author when they were writing this? What caused them to write this, whatever the case may be, because that will get us to where we're meant to be. I think a lot of the times we are reading books and maybe not enjoying them because we don't necessarily understand the thought processes behind why these books were written, or, so on and so forth. So that's something to consider when you were reading. Like, look up author interviews, read the forewords, look up interviews, podcasts, so on and so forth. It is going to get you to where you need to be. I really wish y'all could see my child and how he is laid out so that I could touch him. Come over here, baby. Come down here. Okay, next up, we are going to do my top 10. Okay, so those are my honorable mentions. Next, we're going to go into my top 10. First up, we have The Bird Tattoo, which I mentioned was one of my 5-star reads for the year. And it was the first book that I finished for the year. And I love that I started the year off with a 5-star read, right? It kind of gets you in the mood for reading, so on and so forth, right? So that was all handy dandy. But it tells the story of Helen, who is a young woman from northern Iraq. And it tells her experience of being captured during the war and the very traumatic things that she goes through, but it also goes through her escaping, and it tells how she fell in love with her husband. It tells how she finds her family again. It tells how she migrates to somewhere new and has to figure out how to live with her traumas, right? And not let them control her, and to possibly find love again. It is an amazing story. It is an amazing story. It really set the tone that, for me at least, right? Going back to that, fiction does what you think self-help books do. It kind of set the tone for me that surviving is more than just getting up and moving forward every day. it's way more than that. It is so much more than that. It is so much more than that, right? You have to figure out how to live, because those things have happened to you, and you can't live in this shadow forever of all the terrible things that have happened to you. Yes, they happened and it sucks, right? But you got to do what you need to do so that you can live, right? Like you have to live. So it was an amazing story. I don't think I mentioned it, but these aren't in any particular order. Next is Night Everywhere We Go by Tracy Rose Payton. Another book that I read in January of 2023. It was one of the first books that I read. Phenomenal book. It is historical fiction. It tells the story of a plantation that is not doing that well and has to hire, I forget exactly what the term is, but they hired other slaves to, I guess, breeders, but they hired other slaves to breed the slaves that they already had, which was a group of women. And the entire story is how these women combat this thing, and they are all very different, right? Some of them are young, some of them are older, but it's really about the resilience of Black sisterhood, like what Black women will do to protect each other, even when maybe we don't like each other, when we're not related to each other, or whatever the case may be. We go hard for hours when push comes to shove. And that's really what this book is about, like how they navigated this very yucky situation that was really life or death for them, right? Because some of them had lovers, right? They had husbands that were on other plantations. They had people they loved, or belief systems, or whatever the case may be, and they understood that like doing this could make things so much worse for us. So how do we protect each other? It was an amazing story. Next, we have From Scratch by Tembi Locke. This is actually a show on Netflix now as well. Tembi Locke's story will break your heart and mend it back together just as quickly. She tells the story of losing her husband, but the way that she tells it, if I remember correctly, I listened to the audiobook, and I would suggest you listen to the audiobook for this because she reads it. It felt like being on the phone with a friend as she reflects on what life was like as she went through losing her husband, right? And then having to navigate not only your grief, but the grief of a child, right? And then traveling to his home country, and it's something that I will probably listen to again because there were so many gems in there about her life. But I think she is extremely resilient. I think she kind of talks about her life in a way where she gives herself a lot of grace. I think in a way that you can't do right in the beginning. Like you can't do that in the midst of things, right? Because it's very hard to see from the outside looking in when you're in the middle of things. But she just, the way that she told her story, the way that she, honors her husband, it was an amazing book. I really loved it. Next, oh my gosh, Lone Women by Victor LaValle. This also goes back to me saying listening to an author speak is so important to really getting the full effect of their stories. Mom and I went to a bookstore in Brooklyn called the Center of Fiction. If you are in the area or if you will be visiting, I think you should absolutely go, especially when they are having like an author event. They have writing workshops. They offer a lot of different things. It is a beautiful store, but being able to listen to Victor LaValle speak about his thought process and how he came up with this character from this thing that he read about Black people being able to move out west, right? It was very informative. I think being that I read a lot of different things and I read indie authors, and I follow a lot of indie authors, and I follow a lot of like veteran authors, right? Like I read all across the spectrum, right? I think what I noticed a lot in newer authors is the fact that they are rushing to get things out, right? In the day and age of TikTok, in the day and age of YouTube, right? They want to get this content out so that they can get their followers up and do that whole thing and blah, blah, blah. That's not always how we want to do that, right? I think what some of my favorite authors, Victor Laval, Jasmine Ward, something that I've listened to them and many other authors speak about is how much time they take on these books. These are not books written in a year. These are characters that they live with for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years before we get to meet them. That's phenomenal to me. That is phenomenal. So Lone Women is a horror, right? It didn't scare me. I was very much intrigued. It is about a woman carrying around this steamer trunk, right, that has something in it that has been terrorizing her and everywhere that she's lived all her life, right? And she travels out west to move to a new place to try to get a new start with this steamer trunk, and the thing that is in it starts to wreak havoc, right? So we follow her through this journey, and it reminds me a lot of Beloved, right? It reminds me a lot of Beloved by Toni Morrison, in the sense of your grief, your trauma is a lot more tangible than you give it credit for. So in this case, Adeline is, if I remember correctly, that's her name. Adeline is carrying around her grief in this steamer trunk, right? And what happens when you finally let your grief go, right? Like, or if you keep trying to contain all these emotions, how will that affect you eventually? It's an amazing. I loved every second of it. I've read through most of his catalog. I think there are a couple books that I still have to get through, but he is my favorite. When he followed me on Twitter, I was like, oh, that's my friend now. Like, I absolutely love him. The Changeling didn't come out this year, but The Changeling was adapted for TV on Apple TV. So if you have not read The Changeling by Victor Laval, you absolutely should. And you should watch the show because it is amazing. They did a phenomenal job adapting it to TV. Apple TV, they got some good shows. If you ain't subscribed, you should. And they're not paying me to say that, but y'all could pay me if you want. If you want, y'all can send me a little check. I got you. Next up is a romance, but this reads a little bit more like literary fiction to me. It is The Thing About Home by Rhonda McKnight. It is my first time reading a book by her. I thoroughly enjoyed this book. Talk about reading outside of your comfort zone. When the beginning of this book, it is, the main character is a content creator, and she's about to renew her vows to her husband, and he says no at the beginning of the book. And when I tell you, at first I was like, this is not for me. This is not for me at all. But I stuck through, and it goes between some historical fiction, as well as her traveling back home to her father's side of the family to learn about them. And it really hones in on the idea of home and the history of your people. Like, that thing that I say often about how, like, we are as different from our ancestors as we think we are. Like, it's a very sweet book. It's a little bit of spice in there, nothing too crazy, but compared to some of the other things that I read this year, it was mild. But it did make me a Rhonda McKnight fan. It's a book that I still think about often when people are asking me for recommendations. It is something that I throw out there as something that I want to recommend. I had a wonderful time listening to that book. I listened to the audiobook, and yeah, I believe she has another book coming out this June. And I'm really looking forward to that. The Thing About Home was amazing. It was amazing. The next book, oh my gosh, this is another book that I think about often. It is The Postcard by Amber Rest. This is actually a translated work. I know some people they want to read translated works. It is a story about the Holocaust in a way that I have not seen before. Now, I also haven't read many books about the Holocaust, maybe like 4 or 5 tops. But this one, instead of focusing on concentration camps, it tells the story of siblings and them being separated and some other things that happened that I had no clue about. But it also, as it's going back and forth, it's present day with a modern day woman and how her family history affects how she sees herself as a Jewish woman and the things that she decides to teach to her child because of how the Holocaust affected her mother and her mother's siblings and her grandparents. Like, it was really interesting. I never really hear people talk about the generational effects of the Holocaust as much as we talk about concentration camps and Hitler and all of the other things. But there was also a lot, what I really enjoyed was also the different tidbits of history that I just didn't know, like different things that were done, how people were hiding. It talks a little bit about art. It was really, really informative. And again, this might be to my mishap of not educating myself, which my fault. But and also it made me feel like there were so many things that were left out when they were teaching us. But again, it makes me think about history from that aspect of when you were learning about history, the things that you're learning about come from someone's perspective, and there were so many other perspectives. There were so many other things happening we just didn't know, because depending on who you talk to and so on and so forth, or whatever the case may be. So it was a really good book, and something else that I recommend to people that say that they're into historical fiction. I think you'll really enjoy this. Excuse me. Next, Real by Kennedy Ryan. One of the best, hands down, one of the best audiobooks I've ever listened to. Hands down, one of the best audiobooks I've ever listened to is Real by Kennedy Ryan. First of all, the cover of this book is absolutely beautiful. It tells the story of a actress who gets recruited for her very first movie by this director who sees her in a play. She was an understudy. She has to perform. He happens to be there. And the movie is based on a artist that he was studying or whatever, or he came across, and he wanted to do a movie on this artist. So this book has actual singing in it. It's so good, but it also touches on lupus. I think one thing that I like about Kennedy Ryan is that she doesn't shy away from the hard conversations, right? She doesn't shy away from topics that are realistic to what would affect a real life relationship. So like having lupus, right? And not wanting to tell this really, really fine man that wants to date you, that is, that is giving you this opportunity to be in this film, right? So you already got to hide your relationship. You can't really say nothing. But then as well, you also don't want to tell him that you have lupus, right? And then she gets really sick, and like dealing with the insecurities that comes from, losing her hair, or the different rashes that she gets on her skin, or how sick she actually is. And, like battling those things in a relationship. It just was a very, 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 very good story. I absolutely loved it. Next, Holler Child by Latoya Watkins. I did a video on this. You guys know Latoya Watkins could write her name down on a McDonald's napkin 20 times, crumple it up and throw it in the trash, and I'm gonna go in the trash can and get it and read it. Okay? She could write her to-do list down on an old sticky note that don't stick to nothing no more, and I'm gonna read it. Okay? And if I ever get the chance to meet her, I'll tell her so myself. That is one writing heifer. Latoya Watkins is, her writing so good, it's gonna make you uncomfortable, but I bet you you know every one of her characters. You know every one of them. You can point them out. You know every last one of them. I thoroughly enjoyed this book of short stories. Every story had something in it that was needed. Things that needed to be said, things that people don't want to say, right? They were uncomfortable, they were strange, they were informative, they were soft, they were hard, they were, whatever Latoya Watkins need from me, I will stand on the rooftops and scream it. Again, next, Jasmine Ward, Let Us Descend. I love Jasmine Ward. So when I started reading again a couple of years ago, right, when I decided to make this channel, right, well, turn this channel into a booktube channel. If you go back in my videos far enough, it's still videos up there of me doing makeup and things. But anyway, Jasmine Ward was one of the first books that I read. Her and Etaf Rum, her book, A Woman Is No Man, was one of the first things that I read when I started reading again. And Salvage the Bones by Jasmine Ward and Men We Reaped by Jasmine Ward. Those were the three of the first books that I read when I started reading again. And Jasmine Ward blew my mind. Where do I begin with Let Us Descend? So again, this book came out around my birthday in October, and Mom took me to see her speak. It was actually again with in collaboration with the Center for Fiction, the bookstore that I told you about earlier in this video. And Let Us Descend is on the surface a slave narrative. It tells the story of a slave literally descending. She is sold from Virginia down to the deeper south, to Louisiana, to slave pens. And that's what it's about on the surface. On the surface, it's a slave narrative. Beyond that, deeper, if you want to go deep, it is a woman's journey with grief. And if you know anything about Jasmine Ward, or you've read any of her work, you know that a lot of what she writes about are journeys with grief and how they affect you and those around you and so on and so forth. But I think what is so powerful about this, similar to the bird tattoo, is figuring out how to love again, figuring out your anger that you have with spirit, right? Whatever it is you believe in, whether that's the ancestors, whether it's God or Jesus or Buddha or Allah, whatever it is, being able to tell them that you are angry and that you don't understand the way that they move, right? Being in conversation with spirit. And it when I tell you it is a powerful book, it is something that I will probably read multiple times over, because I don't think that you can actually I don't think you can take it all in one sitting. There are so many things about the book, but it did make me want to read Men We Reaped again by her, because there are parallels in it. Listening to her speak is absolutely amazing. She did an interview on the Stacks podcast, which is a book podcast if you guys are interested in that sort of thing. And I think you can look up her the event that she did with the Center for Fiction. If I can find it, I'll link it below. Absolutely amazing book. It's a small one, and I tell y'all all the time, them books that's less than 300 pages, like those 250, 260 page books, them little bitty ones, baby, they come swinging, they pack a punch. That was such a good book. And then last but certainly not least, Only for the Week by Natasha Bishop. When I tell you, I think I've read, like, by the time I got to Only for the Week, like, I've read a few romances. This was the first one that made me feel like, oh, I get why y'all be having book boyfriends. Like, this my man, and y'all can't tell me nothing. Rome, okay, he is the blueprint. He is what, when I make my little list at night, I want Rome from Only for the Week. That's who I want. That's the one that I want. So this tells the story of a character who is going to a destination wedding of her sister, but her sister is marrying her ex-boyfriend, and her family thinks that she is up in arms about this, and she's really not. Like, she understands that that man was not really for her, and that him and her sister actually make a good match. Like, she was like, he and I were more like best friends that happened to hunch a couple times more than anything else. And Rome is his best friend, and they end up sitting next to each other on the plane, find out that they are attracted to each other, and then make the decision that this could only happen for the week, because they were there a week early before the week of the wedding, right? So they would be there for 2 weeks, but it could only happen for the week. And it was very spicy. Rome had some tricks in his little back pocket. And I want to put myself, it was so good. Every time someone posts that they're reading it or whatever the case may be, I'll be like, you're gonna fall in love with Rome, but I'm here to tell you, hussy, he was mine first. He was mine first. Do you hear? And I'll fist fight you about Rome. Don't be lusting behind my man now. I'll fight you. Dang it. So, if you've made it to the end of this video, leave me a stack of books. Tell me what some of your favorite books were for 2023. And yeah, if no one has told you today, I love you. You are kind. You are smart. You are important. Bye, friends.